Hello, thanks for joining me. This is Jessie, and this is my channel, The Caffeinated Bookworm. So today I'm going to be reviewing My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. So I finished Dead House Gates, and I wanted something short and not so deep and expansive to read before I started on Memories of Ice. And so I picked up this one as well as the book that my teenager gave me for Mother's Day, which is The Last Bookshop in London. I know I said Paris on my last video, but it's London. And I have finished My Best Friend's Exorcism. So Grady Hendrix is the author of Horror Store. I'm sure some of you have seen the book. I think it's like a square book, or at least that's the way it looks on the internet when you look at the ebooks. I couldn't tell you what made me pick up this book. It has a cover that looks like an old VHS tape. And if you're old enough to remember what those look like, it's very 80s, early 90s blockbuster reminiscent. I was never a big Exorcism fanatic. I didn't like the movie The Exorcism. I don't like movies about other exorcisms. It's not something that ever really captured my interest, and to the point where I would rather just not watch the movie. But this is rather interesting. So you have Abby, and the book starts off with Abby throwing a birthday party. She takes the invitations. This is back in the 80s. She takes the invitations to her school, and she is so excited. She wants to show off her roller skating skills at the roller derby for her birthday. She is in love with E.T., the extraterrestrial, but her and her friend calls him the extra terrible. It's cute. And so there's a lot of that like old nostalgic like 80s stuff going on in here, to the point where a lot of the chapters are named based off of 80s songs. And she takes the invitations. The teacher has it up on the board that she's supposed to give out the invitations. Well, then the rich girl comes in, Margaret, and invites everybody over to her house for horse riding. And so everybody's really excited about the horse riding. The teacher then hands out the invitations, and Abby's upset because she knows that everybody's going to want to go to the rich girl's horse riding party, but she has hope. So she brings cupcakes in and hands them out, and everybody eats the cupcakes. And, in her little girl mind, she's like, I hope that means that they're going to come to my party. Well, the day of her party comes, and her parents are at the roller skating rink, and they're waiting, and nobody shows up. Finally, the new girl, Gretchen, comes in with her parents, and Abby's disappointed. She doesn't know who this girl really is. She's not who she was hoping was going to show up. But the girl gives her a present. Her parents leave, and Abby opens it up, and it's a Bible. It's a children's Bible, and so she's really disappointed. She kind of runs off. Her parents are yelling at her for not telling Gretchen thank you. She runs off, and she runs into the bathroom. And she's in the bathroom in a stall crying. Gretchen crawls underneath the stall, and Abby's just floored. She's like, I can't believe this girl just crawled underneath the stall. It's like, this is my space. This is my private space. And they start talking, and Gretchen's like, well, my parents made me give you the Bible. She's like, I wanted to get you the E.T. with the glowing heart. And they become fast friends. It's that moment, that we've all had where we meet somebody and we're just like, but then a conversation starts, and you're instantly best friends. You're soulmates with this person for the rest of your life. You have a connection with this person. And so they go out, and they're roller skating, and they're holding hands, and I think they're swirling as they're holding hands, so they're not really paying attention. And they run into this boy, or this boy runs into them, and Abby ends up with stitches. And when they go to school the next week, the other kids start to make fun of her, and they ask Gretchen, why didn't you come to the horse riding party? And Gretchen was like, well, because she asked me first. They're making fun of her because of her face and her stitches, and they don't believe that it was the boy's fault. Like she was like, Tommy, I think his name was, ran into me when I was roller skating, and like, whatever, don't bring his name into this. Well, then he's walking by the class and he sees her, and he walks in and he's talking to her. He's an older kid, and he's like, being really nice and sweet about it. And he gives her a soda, and like instantly she's shot up, the popularity rank. And so years later, they're in high school, and now they're all friends. This rich girl and Abby and Gretchen, and this other girl named Glee, they're all friends. And they do everything together. They go out on, I think it's Margaret's boat. They go out on Margaret's boat, and they just kind of laze around and drink beer. And they're all considered, I guess, to an extent, like mean girls. One of the girls says, we're going to be the first normal people to do acid. And Gretchen's concerned that she's going to turn into Sid from Pink Floyd. And at first she's like, no, I don't want to do this. And they finally convince her to do it, and they take the acid, they put it on their tongue, and it's dissolving, and nothing happens. None of them have any kind of a trip. I'm not really sure like what happened with that situation. They're all like, you can tell, like, they're so young, and this is their first experience with drugs, and so like they're all willing themselves to start tripping and having hallucinations, and it just doesn't happen. Well, Gretchen ends up freaking out a little bit. She's like, I'm just going to make the most of this. And so she runs off, and she dives into a spot off a bridge where there's supposed to be water, but there's no water, I think is the way that it read. But then she disappears. And so the girls go looking for her, and they can't find her. They go back to Margaret's house. She's not there. They go back to the boat. She's not there. And then they go back, and they kind of spread out in the woods looking for her. Well, Abby comes across this house. It's a brick, like just a square one-room house, and it's half torn down, I think because of a fire. And she hears a man call her name, and she takes off running. She goes and gets the other girls, and they go to the house, and they're kind of investigating, and they're still looking for Gretchen. Gretchen eventually kind of stumbles into where they are, and she's naked except for her shoes, and she's covered in mud. And I think Abby finds her first, and so Abby's kind of trying to calm her down and soothe her. And she's like, "Are you okay?" And Gretchen's like, "No, I'm naked in the woods. I'm not okay." And so one of the other girls gives her her shirt, and they take her home and clean her up. And Gretchen's parents are really like, they don't let her do anything. They're those 80s. I don't want to be offensive, but like, there's a certain group of people within the umbrella of Christianity who are a particular way when it comes to worldly, secular things. So no wizards, no magic, no rock and roll, no a lot of things. And this is one of the problems that I had with this book, is it was so reminiscent of like that Satanist craze in the late 80s. I think it was 80s, 90s, where everything was Satan. Like, you listened to Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne is, a servant of Satan. You watched MTV. MTV is, bringing Satan into your household. And so like it was really difficult to read that, because there was a lot of other deeper, darker things that came from that. If you were around during this time, I don't know if you remember the psychology thing where they were getting people to falsely remember things that happened to them. And it was really terrible. And then like all the teenagers, like not in real life, but like in their minds, all the teenagers were like sacrificing cats and babies. And it was It was ridiculous. And so there's a lot of that going on in kind of like the muted background, and that's kind of like what's influencing a lot of this. And so things kind of go back to normal. Gretchen slowly starts to change her personality. And at one point, Abby is convinced that Margaret's boyfriend was there in the woods and that he raped her. I'm never really quite clear on whether that was true or not, but in Abby's mind, she is convinced that this happened. Gretchen starts to smell. Her personality is changing. She starts being mean to people. Like, she starts acting really crazy, to the point where Margaret and Glee are like, we don't want anything to do with her. Abby is trying to alert people to the severity of the situation. And so she's talking to Gretchen's parents. She's talking to people at the school. She's talking to her own parents. And nothing's really quite convincing anybody that there is something seriously wrong with Gretchen. Well, then one day Gretchen comes back to school. She's chopped off all her long hair. You know, she's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. She's seemingly back to normal. And then things kind of turn on Abby. And so everybody is, you know, kind of glossing over this whole situation with Gretchen when she was crazy and acting like she's like it never happened. And so people are kind of turning on Abby at this point, and Abby is still convinced that there's something wrong with Gretchen because Gretchen is now being mean to her, even though Abby was the only one who really stood by Gretchen's side. And then stranger things start happening. Gretchen brings she brings a shake to school and gives it to Margaret. So she brings a shake for Margaret, who is obsessed with losing weight. And Margaret starts taking this shake, and Gretchen says that her mom had a whole bunch of them and she's not using them. So Margaret can have them. Glee falls in love with one of the teachers at the school, and she signs up for like a extracurricular activity where she's always with him. Abby is still trying to work things out with Gretchen. They've been best friends since her party all those years back when, you know, she had the birthday party at the skating rink, and she's trying to work through this so that her and Gretchen are friends again. Well, Gretchen has been talking about a boy named Andy since she came back from camp during the previous summer, and she's always talking to Andy. And so Gretchen's like, let me call Andy. So she gets Andy's phone number, and she calls him, and Andy's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Gretchen and I haven't spoken since camp. That's when Abby really starts to kind of freak out. And then there's this situation where there's a scene where these buff Christian guys come to the school, and they're doing this skit where they're picking up these really heavy logs and they're breaking bricks, and they're challenging like the football player guys to see who's stronger by picking up these heavy logs and stuff. It was just so surreal. It was comical. But during one point, one of the guys looks out into the crowd and he looks at Gretchen and he says, I see your demon. And Abby has this like aha moment. She's like, somebody who can help me. Abby does talk to him, but then she kind of backs off because she kind of sees the crazy in the situation. But when it gets to the point where Gretchen starts hurting people, that's when she's like, okay, let me go talk to this guy. And so like there's so many red flags when she goes and talks to this guy at a corn dog place at the mall, where all he's doing is sitting there eating corn dogs. And he tells her to drug Gretchen and get her out somewhere where he can perform an exorcism. And so right here, we already know something is going to go terribly wrong. Abby drugs Gretchen. Abby goes to Gretchen's house, and Gretchen is like out of her flippin' mind. Like, her house smells. She shoots her dog. It's just unbelievable. And at this point, Gretchen's parents are blaming Abby, and they're telling the superintendent at the school that Abby is a drug dealer. And it's just unbelievable, like how this has escalated. Like, you hit a point in the book and you're like, well, that escalated quickly. Yes, it did. And so we go from, they become best friends at Abby's birthday party at a roller skating rink where they're, just two little girls holding hands, twirling. And then we're in a log cabin or something in the woods. And Abby is there with this crazy exorcist muscle guy, and they have drugged Gretchen and tied her to the bed. And he is like, okay, I know you don't believe in this stuff, but I'm going to need you to, like, say, like, in the name of the Father or something like that when I tell you to, and don't talk to the demon. And so he starts doing the exorcism. And then, like, he goes and he gets some salt and he starts mashing it into Gretchen's face. And at some point, there is something that is talking through Gretchen. This guy is super happy that he's caught a demon. And he asks Abby to go get some ammonia. And at that point, Abby's like, no, we need to stop this. And so, like, she's fighting with this guy and she's like, she's just a girl. Like, we need to stop. This is crazy. And he's like, no, I need to go get my father. My father's going to know what to do. My father's done exorcisms before. Stay here. Don't just stay here. So he runs off, and Abby has this moment where, she's talking to the demon, and also Gretchen is coming out every once in a while, and she's begging her to kill her. She's begging her to make the demon stop, and she's crying out in pain. And so Abby, she gets the exorcism, like, steps, like 1, 2, 3, and she starts reciting the exorcism stuff, and she starts like trying to do the exorcism herself, and the demon is laughing at her, but then Gretchen's also begging for help. And it's just this whole crazy situation. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, please, please, please make this work before this crazy person comes back with his father, because I don't know what's going to happen when his father gets there. It's all super insane. And so at some point, Abby's like, this shit isn't working. And so she throws away the exorcism steps, and she starts saying things. And she's saying things from, like, their past. She's putting in songs in Tommy's name and his Coke that he gave me, the Coke can, like the Coca-Cola can, the soda candy they gave her. Like, she still has it all these years later. And then everything is fine. And Gretchen gets up, and the police come and they arrest Abby, because, of course, they're going to arrest Abby. This whole thing is crazy. But Gretchen is chasing the police cruiser down the road as they're taking Abby away. And she's screaming for Abby. And they go to trial. And in the middle of the trial, this crazy, like, muscle exorcist guy walks in, and he's like, this is all my fault, and I convinced her to do this, and I'm the one who planned it out and drugged her and plotted it. Abby is released, and he's taken to jail, which eventually ends up with his release for time served, because, like, there's no, like, nobody really knows what's going on. Abby and Gretchen end up being friends for, like, the rest of their lives, like they planned. It reads like, if you ever had, like, a really, like, insane dramatic experience in high school or middle school, and at the time you're like, oh my God, this is going to affect me for the rest of my life. But then years later, you remember it and you're like, oh my God, I haven't thought about that for years. That was so crazy. We were so dramatic. That's what this reads like. Girl drugs her friend, exorcises a demon with rock and roll lyrics. It's just a thing. It happened. Hey, whatever. Oh my God. But there was so much going on around it at the same time. Like, Margaret, she's taking these shakes that Gretchen gave her, that her mom had, but she's taking, like, a whole bunch of them, and she's losing a lot of weight. And it ends up that the shakes are infesting her with tapeworms. So Margaret gets these tapeworms, but they don't know it's tapeworms, and they think that she's just losing weight and she can't eat. And Abby goes and visits her at her house, and her brother lets her in, and he was like, okay, just a few minutes. And he's in the kitchen eating peanut butter and looking through a Hustler magazine. And so she goes up and she sees Margaret in her bedroom, and Margaret's belly is distended. She says, she compares her to a skeleton, and she's like, her stomach's distended. And she tries to give her some ice cream, but then she starts retching, and then this thing crawls out of her mouth, and it ends up being a tapeworm, like 23 pounds of tapeworm. Who knew? And then also Glee, who is the least dramatic of them all, falls in love with the teacher. Gretchen, in her crazy state of mind, writes a letter from the teacher, forges his signature, and then it makes Glee go crazy, and she goes up to the bell tower at the school and tries to kill herself. Crazy book. Because I have rejoined. I haven't been keeping up my Goodreads, but I'm trying, and so I'm not sure how I'm going to end up rating this book. I liked it. I mean, it carried me along. I didn't love it. It was an interesting story. The writing is well done. I think it was just the fact that I have such an aversion to Exorcism. It was definitely worth reading once. There's a lot of nostalgia for anybody who grew up in like the 80s and 90s. There's another one of those books. So there it is. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe below. You have a wonderful day.